When a masked gunman leaps from a helicopter onto the roof, what would you do? You're going to be scared, surely. However, what happened in Vossberga surprised everyone and tricked the authorities. Continue reading as we reveal the tale of the gang that used a helicopter to rob a cash store. This theft seemed straight out of a movie. An enormous bundle of cash, robbers being lowered from a helicopter, and a twist in the plot would make any crime writer happy. The location is Stockholm, Sweden, and the time is shortly before sunrise. The size of the robbery has prompted the offer of a reward of 7 million Swedish kroner, approximately 1 million USD. Early on September 23, 2009, at around 5 in the morning, the nightly staff of the G4's cash service building in Vossberga, Sweden, went about their regular business, counting cash they had received from the second-floor vault and placed on the 6th floor. It was a bad building plan that was unavoidable, but it would unintentionally turn them into a target. Oscar Lindgren, the tour leader, heard the windows rattle at about 5:15 in the morning. He dismissed it at first, blaming the noises on the vehicles waiting for money to idle outside. The team would frequently joke that the truck's sounds were so familiar that they sounded like robbers coming to steal. They had no idea, though, that the jokes they were making would soon become serious. The vibrations were now audible and felt in the insulated cash room, and that wasn't a lighthearted situation. Clearly, it was more than just trucks. To have a better listen to the sound, Oscar gave the team an order to stop and turn off the machine. They called the 3rd floor security crew to look into it because it seemed so strange. Then, Oscar emerged from the insulated room to investigate the disturbance. On the opposite end of the structure, beyond the chamber, he observed 2 men in black donning motorcycle helmets and a 3rd man descending a flight of stairs that led to the window. Oscar noticed broken glass scattered around the floor, mounted ladders, and realized what was happening. He activated the panic alarm and shouted to his crew, alerting them to the impending robbery. Running back, he closed 2 doors, one secured with a basic bolt lock and the other with a strong steel door. He gave his staff instructions to lock up the cages with the uncounted cash after having them send the money they had previously counted down the lift to the vault. After that, they dashed to the room's corner and waited for the police to show up. Strong attacks could withstand the main door's resistance for up to 15 minutes. Beyond the door were windows made of heavy-duty, bulletproof glass. The squad was certain that the cops would show up before the men could ever get to them. The security crew alerted Johan Pedersen, the G4's director of security, to the robbery a few minutes later. Pedersen hurried to the building after grabbing his laptop. He saw the police preparing their helicopters to meet him there. They were already on their way. Pedersen was unaware, however, that the cops were unable to enter the premises and that the helicopters were not en route. Though the police were really en route, they were compelled to halt approximately 650 yards away because they discovered a chain connecting caltrops, which are meant to puncture any tire that passes over them along the 5 roads that lead to the structure. Caltrops are large metal spikes with 3 or 4 prongs. It gets pretty fascinating here since no car is going to pass by unharmed. 2 pilots arrived at the hangar 25 miles away, prepared to carry 2 helicopters to the G4's complex. However, in the distance, they could make out 2 metal boxes blinking a red light. One was on the tarmac and the other was at the front door. They were explosive devices that were prepared to go off. A few witnesses claimed to have heard the thieves blasting through the door. Concerns that the robbers were carrying heavy weapons led to the decision to delay the initial police wave until a SWAT unit arrived. The pilots were unable to ensure that there were no additional weapons out of sight, and they couldn't risk the possibility of them exploding near the jet fuel. This made the authorities realize they were dealing with professionals rather than just a group of opportunistic robbers using a helicopter to rob the G4's building. In an attempt to track down the criminals, the police attempted to launch their own aircraft. When they found a parcel purportedly marked bomb near the airplane, they intended to use, their plans were thwarted. Oscar and his group were back inside the building when they heard the third explosion, which indicated that the robbers were almost inside the chamber. Oscar chose to defy tradition and led his squad out of the building via the second-floor vault and the elevator. The thieves found the police command center, set up his laptop, and accessed a live feed of the cameras after a fourth explosion, a short while later, allowing them entry into the Johan Pettersson. After hearing the blasts and realizing they were dealing with experts, the police declined to enter the structure until they were positive it was secure. Police race in to establish a perimeter around a suspected heist that is taking place early on a gloomy morning in Stockholm. A chopper flies overhead. The goal was to establish a depot that stored a vast amount of cash, the precise amount of which remains unknown, before distributing it to Stockholm's Attens. Until then, all they could do was stand by and watch with Pettersson as one of the three men broke through the currency cage padlocks with a buzzsaw, while the other two men waited for their chance by walking around with weapons in their hands. They stuffed millions of bills into their bags, observing them. After 15 minutes of observation, the men stopped. The men took their money sacks, made their way back to the ladders, and raised their money. One man cuts his hand on one of the ladders while climbing the ladders with the huge sacks of cash. But they don't stop for a second and make it to the top of the roof. After getting everyone and everything back aboard the helicopter, Alexander leaves, flying south, as the cops stand by idly below. The chopper had been hovering for 30 minutes, and the cops on the ground could see it land, pick up the men, and take off as if they had not just pulled off a historic theft, with no one stopping them. The helicopter makes 2 stops, one near Lake Malaran, where witnesses describe hearing speedboats take off shortly after, and another in the Norsborg suburbs, where 1 or 2 men exit. Then Alexander abandons the helicopter in the wilderness, leaving behind the extra zip ties and GPS. Later, investigators found the thieves' abandoned helicopter. The thieves had fled with the money. They simply left behind a trail of humiliated police officers. Well, executed criminal act, correct? However, no. Well, the truth is that the officers were aware that the heist would occur and that they were following a suspect from the start. The Swedish National Criminal Investigations Department, or RKP, had been investigating the robbery and monitoring the mastermind, Goran Bojevic, since late August. Early in September, Goran met at the marina with his 2 associates to finalize his plan. By now, they had bugged Goran's phone and car, with one of them being an undercover cop. Additionally, they noticed that the trace they had put on his phone as a suspect matched the locations of the prepaid phones used in the theft, so they focused more on it. The authorities then obtained the prepaid phone's records and discovered that it was in communication with 12 other prepaid phones. Only those phones were in communication with one another, forming a kind of closed web. The police could then compare this with the data of other suspects. Furthermore, it is stated that the National Task Force has been conducting surveillance at the incorrect depot in Bromma, northwest of the city, despite the fact that Stockholm police had previously been informed that a helicopter heist was being planned in the area. His associate, Alexander Eriksson, was apprehended shortly after attempting to arrange a trip to the Canary Islands, having successfully stolen a Bell 206 helicopter from Roslagen's helicopter base in Norrtälje. In contrast, a bag of cash was found when alleged mastermind Goran Bojevic, who had been seen driving his new BMW around town, was taken into custody at his flat. Along with partial prints from the bombs, which turned out to be nothing more than an empty metal box with a red light bulb that ran on a battery, the authorities were also able to recover DNA from the remaining fragments of the glove. The authorities also found some DNA in the zip ties left at the site of the abandoned chopper. The match was Seifa Kutum, subsequently detained in the Dominican Republic. There is absolutely no chance that a helicopter will land on the flat roof of the courthouse, since 10 individuals were charged with robbery or complicity during a trial that took place in the basement of Stockholm's police headquarters. There were 7 men in jail. Eriksson enters a not guilty plea and receives a sentence of 7 to 8 years, whereas Kadam confesses. Bojevic receives a 3 to 4 year sentence for organizing the G4's heist. There are 4 more for an unconnected purpose, and he cannot be placed inside the helicopter with certainty. Their accomplices receive no more than 5 years. Only 7 of the 10 men ultimately detained for the crime actually served real jail time, ranging from 1 to 7 years. If the police had found all the money, they wouldn't have served the 1 to 7 years. They did serve in prison. Less than half of the millions were ever located, and up to 13 robbers, if not more, are believed to have had some involvement in the crime. Nobody could ever discover the full scope of the theft or where all the money went at this point. The majority of the pilfered money, estimated to be worth between $5 and $8 million, is still missing, though. Investigators believe that some 20 people were involved in the theft in some way, meaning that over half of the team is still at large. The others have left prison. That concludes the tale of the first ever helicopter heist in Swedish history. A well-thought, out and well-carried out heist that was exposed by errors and a tip from Serbian authorities. And that concludes the material for today. Give the video a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel if you liked it.